Yes, I'm actually really happy that so many of you are attending this, because Kafka is not something that you would stumble upon in the SAP ecosystem, but you actually stumble upon Kafka outside of this. So yeah, let's look into this, and we're actually gonna go a little bit into messaging in general. So actually, if you attended the keynote, so actually Daniel showed something for Event Mesh, that we will look at something quite similar, but then we'll actually dig a little bit into Apache Kafka. So in case you do not know it, I will briefly explain what it actually is and how it actually works. And then we will look into cds-kafka, which is a CAP plugin that I built, which enables very easy communication with Apache Kafka. And we'll also look into some use cases, when to use it, or when it makes sense to use it, when it doesn't. And also I'm going to show some code examples and how easy it actually to use. So let's jump right into this. Yes, actually messaging in CAP. So again, this was like part of the keynote. Basically, at its core, CAP is capable of handling two types of requests. So one on the one side, actually everything is evolving around services in CAP. So whether you talk to the database or you deal with OData services, everything is a service, right? And services are able to respond to actually two types of requests. So one are synchronous requests. So whenever you want to talk to a database or to an OData service, you expect an immediate response because you want to do something with the result. And on the other side, there's also native integration for asynchronous processing, right? So you are not directly getting a response, but you potentially send an event into the void, and someone somewhere else can actually subscribe to this and will be notified whenever such an event occurs, right? And this is totally handled in CAP by the messaging service. And as you can see, there are like slightly variations of that messaging service. And each of those classes is tied to a specific message broker and basically handles the transport protocol. The abstraction layer in CAP basically abstracts most of this. And actually, that's, again, something that Daniel showed with advanced event mesh. So in general, on the service level, you actually mostly use three methods. So you use send and run whenever you want to do some synchronous processing. And if you want to send an asynchronous message, you will use emit. So in this scenario, we just use emit to send a message that a book is ordered. And as you can see, we don't expect any return value. We just signal, OK, this is the event, and then it's into the void. So, and on the receiving end, you can actually see that the callbacks are used to actually register to such an event, to be able to be notified whenever such a book review occurred or the book is ordered. And this can be somewhere completely different, right? So this is not the same application. So this is potentially running, I don't know, locally. This is running somewhere on BTP, and they still are able to communicate. So the question is, how does this communication take place? And this is where like message brokers come into play. So you need an actual middleware who actually does the stores the message, receives the message, stores the message, and provides the capabilities to actually subscribe to this and be notified whenever such a message occurs. And as we've seen in the keynote, there are plugins provided by SAP for advanced event mesh. There's a plugin provided for SAP Cloud Application Event Hub, with the limitation that you cannot send events in CAP, which totally makes sense. And as you can see, there's now a plugin available called cds-kafka, which makes it possible to use Apache Kafka as a message broker in between. So as a side note, which kind of also doesn't make sense, actually when I built cds-kafka, I looked into the source code of CAP to actually check out how SAP is doing this. And I was really surprised to actually find already a Kafka adapter in CAP. So there actually is one, but it's actually bound to a Kafka service running on BTP, but actually there is no public available Kafka service. So chances are high that Kafka is used internally as SAP. Okay, so let's briefly talk about what is actually Apache Kafka. So again, this is not a term that you will stumble upon if you're like totally into this SAP ecosystem. But if you slightly raise your head and look abroad, then you potentially might stumble upon Apache Kafka. because it's some kind of industry standard. It's basically an open source distributed event streaming platform, and is actually designed for high scalability, fault tolerance, and real-time performance. It's quite of something similar to the Event Mesh, but it also differs a little bit, because in Event Mesh you have stuff like queues and topics and guarantee deliveries and that letter queues and stuff like this. Whereas Kafka itself, it's more optimized for raw performance and to provide real event streaming. So how this works, we will actually see in a second. Kafka is very popular, also because of its rich ecosystem. So it has things like Kafka Connect, so we can connect arbitrary things to Kafka, Kafka streams, KSQLDB, and there's a lot of tooling around Kafka in the world. Yeah, the general or the core capabilities are publish and subscribe to streams of events. Again, we will actually see in a second what this is. And it will actually store those events. And also in contrary to tools like Event Mesh and stuff, so where messages are consumed and then they will be moved, they will actually be stored in Kafka for a configured amount of time, which makes it possible to consume those events in real time, so be notified whenever something new comes in. But it also possible to like go back in time and reprocess those events for the last week or something. It is actually used, that's like a marketing claim, but I think this is kind of true. Like 80% of all Fortune 100 companies use Apache Kafka, either in small local projects or as enterprise-wide messaging buses. And as I mentioned, Kafka is not publicly available on BTP, but I think SAP is using this internally somehow. All right, I will not explain Kafka in full circle, but let's quickly go at the simplified version. Okay, so Kafka, everything is evolving around topics. So basically, a topic is a kind of a queue where a producer can send messages to, and they will be like aligned on this scenario. Like a producer sends a message and it will be added at the end of this topic. On the other side, there are consumers who want to like receive information that such a message occurred, and they are organized in consumer groups, and they can like grab those messages in sequence from those topics, right? And Kafka internally stores something called an offset, so it knows which consumer group is at which state in the topic itself, right? And the cool thing is, like, you can iterate through this and stay at the end and get notified when something new comes in, but you can also reset the offset and start from the beginning or some place back. That's a rather simplified version of it, because in the real world, this is actually a bit more complex, because you have like partitions, so a topic can be separated into partitions, and partitions, so that's like the scaling thing, can run on isolated Kafka instances. And you can also have like multiple consumers in a consumer group, and they are attached to those partitions, and then you get problems in sequence. Then you need to introduce keys, and that's like it's at the core, it's simple, but if you want to do this good, then it gets actually a little bit more complex. All right. So what actually is cds-kafka? At the beginning of the year, I actually open sourced this. So it's an open source plugin. This is the GitHub link. You can also find this at NPM and can easily install this into your local projects. What it actually does, it implements the messaging service API for Apache Kafka. And it is like fully compatible with all of those Cap9 features, outbox, inbox, data queues, etc. So I will show you that it's super easy to drop this in actually. But it also has some Kafka-specific features built in. So there's like support for keys, partitions, and topics. Actually, I plan to release version 1 before the event. But we actually all work in software, and we know how this works. So I will kind of release this potentially next week when I fixed all the bugs. So, but yes, this was not part of the slides actually. Yes, so there's like extended support for, thank you, for extended CLI support. So there's like specifics, Afro, JSON schema, something we would briefly look into, like Kafka-specific stuff, and also schema registry support, which is not something you would find in CAP, but you find in Kafka. All right. Okay, I need to hurry. Usage scenarios. So I will get this asked quite some time. So when is this a replacement for Event Mesh, or can I just use it? And the answer is actually quite simple. If you're in a scenario where you are totally in the SAP ecosystem, where you have like S4 systems and other SAP cloud and on-premise solutions that provide messages or events, then you don't use it, right? Because like it only makes sense if you have other applications that can talk to Kafka as well, right? So there are S4 systems, etc. They are built and connected to the SAP message brokers, and they work best if you use those. It does make sense to add those in scenarios where you have Apache Kafka or systems outside the SAP ecosystem, and you want to connect your CAP application to the data inside of those systems. Okay. You then have actually multiple options. So one option would be to use SAP Advanced Event Mesh, and this basically supports event bridging or message bridging to actually send or receive events from Apache Kafka, send them to Event Mesh, and then delegate them down to your application. Or you can use cloud integration, which also has a sender and receiver adapter for Apache Kafka, and then you can route the messages through this. But this also always involves some certain middleware. And cds-kafka basically enables you to have direct connections between your application and the Kafka instance. Which version you choose, it's basically dependent on many factors, right? So I cannot make the decision for you, but there are several options, and cds-kafka basically adds one additional without all the hassle to use other services. Okay, and there's a last scenario. If you're building something not related to SAP applications, to S4 systems that are producing events, but potentially you build a SaaS solution by yourself and have isolated tenants that speak to each other, also using messaging, then this, in my opinion, would also make sense to use this, because then you also have senders, receivers, which are able to talk to Apache Kafka, especially if you also have an external system or data from external systems that you want to integrate. I actually had a fourth slide, but when I looked at the licensing for CAP v9 and the limitation that you can only use this in CAP environments, I kind of stripped this out. But if you don't want to have support by SAP, you can also, of course, use this in other scenarios that are potentially not supported by SAP. Okay, so now we have like 6 minutes left. I'm going to show you some examples on how to use this. Okay, so what I actually hope you can read this, or should I make this a little bigger? So now? Okay. Okay. Let's see. I have prepared some examples. We potentially cannot go through all of them. They will be all part of the GitHub repo. So in case you can then check this out, and they will provide readmes, and you can go through this. There's also already some blog posts on the existing Kafka. I will post another one when the version 1 releases, so you can follow this by yourself. So what I actually did is I have a local Kafka instance running. So we have a Docker file. So there's a Kafka broker, there's a schema registry, and there's a UI on top. So if I go to the browser, you can actually see that we have a Kafka system running locally on my machine. And I'm going to have some consumer and producer applications all running on the same machine, obviously, for showcase reasons, but they can be run somewhere else and just communicate through the broker. All right. I need to move this window a little bit. At the center of the screen. Okay, so first scenario, conceptual level, and that's basically what we saw on the slides and also what Daniel showed on the slides. If you do this do messaging on a conceptual level, you don't talk to the messaging service, don't talk to the message service at all. Right. So let's quickly go into this and look at the application. So we have a producing application. And all you need to do is basically configure the messaging. So you need to require cds-kafka, of course, which because it's locally running, I had not edited. Okay, interesting. It's part of the workspace, so it's already there. But what you actually need to do is to configure the configuration. So I'm telling that the messaging service itself will use cds-kafka, and those are the connections options locally. And then I'm actually just defining a service and an event. And so there's nothing very specific to it. And on the consuming side, in the package JSON, we basically have the same configuration. But we actually, since those are two separate applications, we actually import the producer service. And we specify a group ID for the consumer in Kafka, because every consumer needs its own ID to make Kafka enable that, okay, you are this one, and I know your offset. All right, so let's fire this up quickly. And so I can do on the producer side, I learned a lot from DJ Adams on how to use REPL. So we're actually connecting to the terminal with the application. And what I'm actually doing here, you can actually see that we are using Kafka for messaging, and you can get some log messages from Kafka that it connected. And we simply send out this, emit this message. And then you will get some information that Kafka actually created the topic because it was not already available inside of Kafka. And the message has been emitted. So when we actually look at the UI and look at the topic section and hit refresh, then this totally works. Okay, I'm not sure why it does not work. Oh, there it is. Okay, so now we have like the topic, and if I look inside of the topic, you can actually see there is a message that we send, and it contains also the message information. So, and now if I want to consume this, as we've seen in the consumer, we simply connect to this service and subscribe to the event, and will be notified whenever there is one. So I just start CDS serve. And there it is, like it received the message. Okay, so it's really that simple. And again, like this, this is what Daniel showed. So on the conceptual level, you don't have to deal with the messaging API at all. But of course, there's a lot of more to this. Looking at the time, I need to briefly go over this. Okay, and potentially just show you the code. So you can do this low level, on the low level side. And call the messaging service directly, right? So in this scenario, we're going to emit a message through the messaging service. It looks kind of similar, but what you need to do is you need to specify the full event name as part of the first argument. But there's even more. Like, this is an alternative syntax, but you're also capable of adding extra headers. So in case you need some additional headers, they will be also stored inside of Kafka. And cds-kafka basically provides specific headers that can be set if you want to specify a Kafka key, for example, because the concept of a key is now available in Kafka, or in messaging, CDS messaging. So this has been provided through this annotation. Okay, so looking at the time, I think we might run out of time. So potentially one additional thing that Kafka supports is the definition of schemas, right? So if you have an event, you can basically send arbitrary data through this event. But Kafka provides a mechanism to actually register a certain structure of this event. And whenever you want to send something to this topic and the structure is not the same, then it will like say, no, I don't want to receive this. Okay, so just to quickly go over this, the implementation will provide ways to actually compile the CSN model into Afro, for example, or a JSON schema, and then we extract the events and we'll transform the events to the respective schema and send them to Kafka. So we'll actually have this in Kafka already. And what this also does, like if you use, for example, Afro, the message itself will look different if you store this on Kafka. So on the one side, you just send the JSON, the stored message will look different, but when you receive this back, it will be deserialized into the original data. So again, this is all backed into version 1, which is not yet released. I will release this by the end of, potentially in the middle of next week. And yeah, since it's open source, I'm super excited to get feedback. Yesterday, someone approached me and said, use this, and it saved a lot of time and effort, and I was really happy. So if you have feedback, positive, negative, reach out to me. And yes, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. I noticed one typo on one of the slides. The GitHub repo for that is obviously Mike Zaschka /cds-kafka, not CDS caching. But you can go check that.
Just a hint for the next presentation, which is
there you go.
11 a.m.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. Okay.
All right. Do we have questions in the room? Right. Can maybe take 2, looking at the time. Yeah.
Great stuff, Mike.
Thanks.
What is the usage of event when you emit an event? Because event creates a topic in Kafka, right? And sending a header as a topic as well. So you basically creating 2 topics at once, or?
Okay, so like there's a mixed match. So whenever if you do it the native way, you will have the topic name, so the event name be matched to the topic in Kafka. But you have also the possibility to override, so to direct to events in Kafka in CAP, but have like a different topic attached to this.
So the Kafka header will take precedence over.
It will point to the topic, so it still consume the event XY in CAP, but the topic that will be triggered in the background will be the one that you configure to the header.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
All right, maybe one more.
Hi, Michael. The library will have support for on-premise connection because some customer has the Kafka in the on-premise system, but I tried once time to connect in the Kafka on-premise using SOX 5, but didn't work. So I don't know what can I do now.
Okay, I receive this message quite often. No, the library does not support this on, but like I found a blog post in the sub-community that basically explains the issues you have when going through the Cloud Connector, but there's a workaround. I will potentially post this in the README.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. That's it for that. Thank you, Mike.